Originally, I was going to answer some general questions that had been posed often throughout the channel's history, and then I was going to answer a few questions from you guys in the comments, but you guys left so many questions, and a few of you need answers like right away, so this video is going to answer the questions that you guys left in the comments. The video tomorrow is going to answer some more general channel-specific questions. First one by Rivers RPG channel says, I'm looking to speed up combat in my 3.5 games. Now, mind you, we're down to only 9 PCs now, and they're all 20th level. Any thoughts? And no, we're not going to break it into 2 groups. So, Rivers. I'm going to call you Rivers. I could be 3/4 of the way down a bottle of Jack Daniels, half-starved and delirious, and I still might not agree to run a campaign with 9 PCs. That's a little crazy. Like, I don't know how you got yourself into this situation, but I'm gonna try my best. It's been a hot minute since I've ran or been in a 3.5 game, but there are a few measures that we can take in any system to speed up combat. This is a tip that you might not have heard often, but you can decrease the enemy's health and increase their damage. So if you slash the enemy health by half, then you'll need to double the amount of damage that your enemies are dealing. This is going to shorten your combats while still maintaining the amount of danger they pose. Depending on how much you do this, you can shorten most combats to a round or 2 while still preserving danger. Because a big problem with combats is when you're just wailing against big meatbags, but everyone knows that they've already won the combat. Another thing that you can cut down is actual time spent rolling dice. So if you're running enemies, you can use average damage values instead of actually rolling dice. You'll still be rolling to hit, but you won't be rolling damage. The damage is going to be consistent every single time. Now, if your players agree to it, they might be willing to use average damage as well, and that would significantly speed up combat. Another thing you can do is set a designated timer for when it's a player's turn. I like to usually set a timer for 2 minutes, and this timer represents the amount of time a player can spend strategizing, asking questions of the DM, and overall deciding what to do before dice are rolled. If they do not take their action before the time reaches 0, their turn is skipped. Usually this leads to overall player turns that are between 3 to 4 minutes, which for a level 20 party is usually considered good. Now with 9 players that still might be too much time, as a round of combat is still going to take like half an hour. And that's if you are moving fast on your enemy's turns, which, considering they are a level 20 party, I'm assuming A, you're running a lot of enemies, or B, you're running one big enemy with so many special abilities and powers that it's like you're running an entire army. So you might need to shrink that timer down to 1 minute. But if they've been playing their characters until level 20, they should probably be able to figure it out. And my final tip that I guess I would give to you, Rivers, is to set other goals than just killing all the enemies in your combats. Maybe players need to work together to solve a particular puzzle, and that's when combat ends. Maybe a combat is built around taking down one enemy and not having to kill everything else there. That way, players should ideally be able to figure out the trick to the combat and it can end that way. But I'm going to be honest, tier 4 combats take a really long time. So I'm not surprised if you're experiencing 2 to 3 hour combats, especially in D&D 3.5 from what I remember. So I hope that helps. Next question though is from GamerGuy3497. A question: I am running Horde of the Dragon Queen, and I can feel that it does not have much room for player characters to make their own choices / side quests. Yeah, because of the cultists constantly moving. What kind of in-game reasons could I use that the PCs have some opportunity for side quests / personal interests? Not only in this game, but also in a more general sense, balancing ongoing story with the personal interests of the players. See, I knew that this was going to be a problem as soon as I read Horde of the Dragon Queen. It is one of my least favorite D&D adventures ever. And it's for the reasons that this person listed. It's really hard to dive into side quests and other personal interests. So firstly, I'm going to try and talk about this in a more general sense with balancing an ongoing story. Ideally, in most D&D games, I try and get people to do something I call folding plot points. You want to always be making sure that a plot point connects in some way to one, if not multiple player characters. So if the party is going somewhere to retrieve a magical item, you could put that magical item in some far off place that no one's ever heard of. Or you could reveal that it is actually underneath one of the party members' hometowns. Or that the magical item is in some way connected to a beloved NPC or an NPC that the party has met before on a side quest. We need to be working with an economy of storytelling. As a DM or game master in any system, imagine that you have something like 50 plot coupons at the start of any story. Whenever you introduce a new NPC or place or major plot point, you are spending one of those plot coupons. But it costs you nothing to reuse the plot coupons. If you start thinking about your D&D campaigns like this, you're going to start to realize very quickly that you are going to blow through a lot of your plot coupons at the beginning of a story. So I want you to start visualizing that you have 50 plot coupons. And whenever possible, gamer guy, I'm going to need you to reuse those plot coupons in new and interesting ways. We are going to be tying those personal interests of the players back into the story whenever possible. Now, in a pre-written campaign, this could be that if this ancient item is being held by some random NPC that we really don't care about, it's actually being held by an NPC that a player made up in their backstory. We're going to go in, we're going to rewrite the adventure a little bit, we might just change the name of the character so that they're slotted into the player's backstory. We might run their personality a little bit differently so that it aligns with the player backstory. But overall, we're going to be folding those plot points into each other. And ideally, if you look at the plot from a 50,000 foot view, it should look like this massive interconnected web. That way, whenever the players go and do a side quest or try and pursue their personal interests, it's also moving the main plot along. We're not wasting time or those plot coupons for things that are not going to turn up. And players are going to like it more because it feels like their backstories really matter, and those side quests really matter, because they do matter. And it gets to this point where players become really invested in each other's backstories and going on these side quests. Because after enough folds, players begin to realize, not only do I need to care about my backstory, but I should really be caring about their backstory, because they have connections to the main plot as well, and I have connections to the main plot, so if I go and help my other party members with their backstories or their side quests, in a roundabout way, I'm helping myself. I have gotten even the most narcissistic of players to still care about what others are doing, just because they realized that they were in this entangled, interconnected web. Now, that being said, Hoard of the Dragon Queen is this huge conundrum, because it is, quite frankly, gamer guy, a terribly written adventure. The Cult of the Dragon does move around a lot. You are bouncing from place to place and not really staying for long. If I'm remembering this adventure correctly, most of the time is spent just traveling. So you might not like to do this, but the best advice I could give is to go into Hoard of the Dragon Queen and see where you can start folding plot points. You might start rewriting portions of the story. I am so sorry, because most DMs figure out they have to do this. That's not the point of a pre-written adventure. The point of a pre-written adventure is that it is pre-written. I don't need to explain this to you, gamer guy, of course, you're a smart guy. But Hoard of the Dragon Queen has a lot of problems. So if you can, try to figure out what plot coupons not only the adventure, but your player characters have already used, and begin to weave those together. My advice, make a spreadsheet. Read ahead in Hoard of the Dragon Queen, see which NPCs and events are yet to come, and just change some places, change the names of some NPCs, and if at all possible, you can try making Hoard of the Dragon Queen a little more cohesive. Obviously, I'm trying not to give spoilers for Hoard of the Dragon Queen, just in case there is someone out there who is in a Hoard of the Dragon Queen campaign. But, again, there's a lot of traveling involved, and it doesn't necessarily need to be all that traveling. If the party's going to walk across half of Faerun to go and meet a person or get one thing, and they're not even going to stay there for very long, then maybe you just move that location to like 2 or 3 miles outside of town. It doesn't need to be this whole epic journey. Alright, another question now from Cyberrift. I have a DM question. I'm a DM. I can help with those. I run a party with a Norse sort of theme. I love Norse themed campaigns. And I did have a session 0, but I don't have a lot of great experience, I think that's supposed to be with DMing. So I settled some matters, but my party is chaotic, and I'm trying to get them to interact with the world. But I feel like I have to explain everything, or provoke my players with a question every time, like, what would you like me to do? I'm also trying to set a more serious mood for more serious moments. My party is very boisterous and don't want to be rude or shut down the fun for them in the game. So I try to play into it when they have downtime or are messing around in a tavern. I would like to know your advice on what I could do to possibly solve this so I can create dramatic tension and cool or scary moments to help invest my players. Cyberrift, I am genuinely so happy for you because thus far, if you're trying to run a serious campaign, you've done everything right, buddy. Let me tell you something. Every serious campaign, every successful serious campaign that I've run has started out as a silly campaign. A sort of goof of the week campaign, if you will. Because do you know what people get invested in stories? People don't get invested in the stakes of the world. People get invested in characters and each other. I hope you've seen Spider-Man 2, because it is an absolutely fantastic movie. But in Spider-Man 2, at the end of the movie, the tension and the stakes don't come from a star that might wipe out New York. The tension comes because Mary Jane and Peter Parker are in danger, and we like both of those characters. Notice how in that movie, in so many of the fight scenes, we get characters that we actually like being involved in them, like Aunt May, for instance. So hopefully you're picturing that now. We want to get players invested in things that they like. And Cyberrift, because they have been engaging in this boisterous campaign, and I'm going to make the assumption here that your players are having fun. They keep coming back every week, so you're doing some things right. Cyberrift, I want you to find the things that they love, alright? I want you to figure out which NPCs they like. Do they have a tavern they like drinking at? Maybe they become really invested in a town. If they're not already, get them invested in their goofy adventures. Maybe they're made thanes of their local town after a series of hijinks ensue. We're just gonna make it so that they care about things, or at least have good memories with these places or things. And if they're having fun and goofing around, chances are there are already some NPCs or places that they really like. And then this is one of the hardest parts of DMing, and this might not be everyone's style, but it certainly is mine. Because once they are at their happiest, and once they're at their most invested, the villains of your campaign are going to do something, and you are going to drive a dagger into your players' hearts. Ideally, this moment is a paradigm shift for the entire campaign. This is when the players realize that these villains are real, or the situation that they're in has become serious. At first, the stakes might not have been personal. Sure, you're trying to have these serious moments, and the players understand, oh yeah, I mean, the world's in danger, a country might fall, what does that matter, you know? We're out here, we're having a good time, we're goofing off with Larry. But when they come back to town and realize the villains have been there, or better yet, are there, and they learn that Larry is dead, that he's been killed, and that his last words before being killed were, you know, the name of your party will avenge me. Well, hot damn, things just got serious. Because your party had a connection to that NPC. They had good memories of them. And in that moment, that NPC, you, are vesting your faith within them. You are playing the moment seriously in something that the players care about. And the mark of a serious campaign is not that the mood is serious all the time, but that the players can get serious when the time calls for it. So that's one strategy for you, Cyberrift. Build off on the hijinks that they've been doing throughout who knows how many sessions. Figure out what the party cares about and have a serious thing happen. And mind you, it doesn't need to be death. You can have many more nuanced circumstances than that. In a current campaign I'm running, this paradigm shift came when the wife of a player coughed up a flower. Now, these flowers are said to be cursed and are thought to be spreading virus and disease, and may or may not be connected to dark powers. But it's this complete paradigm shift because the party really likes this NPC, and for her to be coughing up one of these flowers is really, really bad. The NPC isn't dead, in fact, she feels fine, but that terrifies the players the most. She feels fine, but something is obviously wrong with her. And God, do they care about her. She's like the party's cool aunt. Except for one player, because she's their actual wife. But it's in that moment that the party got so much more invested, because that serious moment completed a paradigm shift. And of course, there is the opportunity for you to sit down with players before the session and say, hey, we might be moving into some more serious moments throughout this campaign. During these serious moments, I would really appreciate if we settled down and really focused in, because while you guys are players as well, I'm a player, and these are the moments that I am playing for, because you as a DM are a player. And if you're sitting down at the table because you want these more serious moments, ideally a courteous group of players will go and play those moments more seriously with you. This is a game of give and take. Just as some players might like combat more and others might like more RP, and both players sit down at the same table because they realize some moments are going to be more combat and others are going to be more role-playing. It's the same deal with seriousness and funniness. Some players want a more serious campaign, other players just want goofs and laughs. But both types of players can sit down at the same table if they have this good relationship of give and take. And one final note for you, Cyber Rift, and this is a tough one, because you could be running the greatest game ever, and I'm going to have a video on this coming up relatively shortly within the coming month, but you could have the greatest game, and you could be running a game that can be spoken about for 1,000 years. Like, it is the absolute greatest Norse-themed campaign anybody has ever run in the history of forever. But guess what? Your players don't want to play that campaign. That is not the campaign tone they want. And the greatest campaign that has ever been run will fall apart through no fault of your own, because that's not the game your party wants to play. That's not the tone that they're looking for. A game master in any system can only run the games that their party allows them to run. And while it's few and far between, Cyber Rift, there is a chance, and I'm going to be straight up honest with you here, that this is not the tone that this party is looking for. And if that's the case, and you're still having fun, no sweat, but in the future, maybe you package up those serious moments in this campaign. Maybe you look for a party of players who are a little bit different and who are looking for more serious moments. And then you run your more serious Norse-themed campaign with them. I'm not saying you need to do this. Again, I don't know your players. I'm just providing this as like worst case scenario. But it's something that I think you might need to keep in mind. So if all else fails, keep doing what you're doing. Have fun. Understand that this might not be the party for the campaign you're trying to run, and just save this more serious campaign with the more serious plot points for later, or for when this party is ready. Ooh, I spent a long time answering that question, but I thought that was a really, really good question, so I shouldn't apologize for it. That was just a really good one. Next one, from Maromes Ajady 9769. Can you make more tier list videos? I loved your Demon Lord one. Well, thank you. I will watch any sort of tier list video, but I think it could be cool if you rank the Critical Role characters in terms of strength or anything you're interested in. I have honestly considered that. I would be hesitant for Critical Role, like I always am, because goddamn, the critters are nasty sometimes. Never has a group of people told me that I am worthless, should kill myself, and I have no redeeming qualities as a human being. All comments I've received, more than Critical Role fans. I mean, they say don't forget to love each other all the time on Critical Role. At least I hope they still do. But some people in that community really just forget. But yeah, I love doing tier lists. It's just I'm always a little bit more hesitant because some of the absolute worst comments come from tier list videos where people are arguing, oh, you put something in B tier when I thought it should be in S tier. And yeah, after a while you kind of get used to it, but it's always in the back of my mind like, man, do I want my comments section to be absolutely flooded for maybe the next 2 or 3 weeks with people just spamming hate at me? And there are some kind commenters like you who leave the nicest comments. But unfortunately, my human monkey brain at midnight only remembers all the terrible comments that I've received. Now, with all that being said, yeah, I definitely am planning on making more tier lists. I have a tier list for the fighter subclasses in the work. I'm also putting together a tier list of systems and RPGs that are not D&D. That one might cause a bit of a firestorm, but I'm okay with that because a lot of you guys haven't played a ton of RPGs, so those comments I think will kind of wash off a lot easier. Like when I inevitably put something like Band of Blades S tier, which one of you guys are going to yell at me and say that I'm wrong? Like 3 of you maybe. And I suppose at the end of July, if I'm really just running out of steam, or some of these like final 5 or 6 videos just aren't coming together, then yeah, I'd be interested in ranking Critical Role characters in terms of, I guess, strength at the end of their respective campaigns. Or maybe my overall ranking of their character arc, that's subjective enough where I think that even if people get on my ass, it really doesn't matter. But to answer your question, yeah, I do want to make more tier lists. It's just, now that I'm a bit older, I try and pick and choose those battles a lot more carefully. Because again, I like interacting with people like you who are asking questions, who need some help, who want to geek out about things in TTRPGs and D&D. I don't like to sift through a ton of hate comments to find you guys if I can. Ideally, I want to take my 20 minutes a day, go through and say, oh, that's where you guys are. Awesome. And I can answer your questions and talk to you. Next up is Puff Mogi. My homebrew campaign is going on hiatus till next year. Oh, I'm sorry. Should I go hard on world building / plot points or wait for my players to influence the story in the world? Alright, so this also kind of stems into a video I'm working on for later this month or in August. So, this is the most important tip I can give any DM when world building or writing lore for their campaign world. Your players do not care about your lore or your world building. At least not the effort that you put into writing it. Your players care about characters. It's the same point I made to Cyber Rift not long ago. So first off, I would say focus on world building and not plot points, because plot points are going to come. As long as you've got your 3 campaign arcs, and if you don't know what those are, right up here, you can see my campaign arcs video. But if you got those general arcs mapped out, so if you got those arcs all handled, you can go and start focusing on world building, because that's really fun. We all like to world build, but some of y'all world build in the complete opposite direction of where you need to be going. All the world building you do should relate in some way to a D&D campaign that you're going to run. Or the world building should relate to plot points or interesting tidbits that players can use for their backstories to latch onto in the D&D campaign. The world building should be usable. Alright, Puff, I'm going to show you something real quick. And look, this is copyrighted. It's actually, I actually copyrighted this because I have plans for it. But this is volume 1, the world building document that I give to pretty much all my players when they go into my homebrew campaign world. Now, some things to note. I run 7 weekly campaigns a week. I run for over 30 different players. My campaigns are very consistent. And my last homebrew world ran 26 campaigns in it before I retired it after only 5 years. So that is why this initial document is over 200 pages. And you might be thinking that's a lot, and yeah, I would agree. And it's even crazier when you realize most of my players, a majority, not all, but about 60%, have read this entire document and the other volumes that I've put out as well. But it's because I write the lore in a very specific way. Because everything connects back into plot points they're going to see. When players read the lore document, they realize that this is all stuff they can use in their backstory. It's full of plot hooks. It's written in an interesting way. It's written from the perspective of a person who lives in this world, who is documenting everything. So not everything is necessarily accurate as well when they're actually going through it. They are understanding the culture of the world, which is important for them in order to get into character. But they also realize literally everything I put in there comes up in other campaigns. And they don't know which bit of information is going to come up in their campaign. But they like to speculate, and they all like to talk to each other about it. And in addition, it gives them a way to bring out some of that lore, where if they want to learn about something, or they want to explore an idea within my campaign world, they can just say they're from X place or had an interaction with Y character, and then they're done. So if your campaign is going on hiatus until 2024, I believe that's what you're telling me, then my advice is to solely focus on world building that's going to affect your players and into coming campaigns. Everything you write should be a plot point. NPCs you put down should be likely to show up in future campaigns of yours. And Puff, I'm going to assume that you do not run the number of campaigns I run, nor with the consistency that I run them. So my advice is you max out at 30 pages. Imagine those plot coupons again that we talked about earlier in this video. And I want you to think about having 50 plot coupons while you are world building. That is places, NPCs, and large concepts within your world, like a magic system, for instance. And then I want you to milk each and every one of those concepts for all it's worth. So you're gonna have those 30 pages, which ideally you could show your players if you really needed to. And I want you to get those 30 pages really refined. I'm talking like you should have a page maybe where if they read it, someone could instantly understand your world. Someone could know exactly what they're hopping into by just reading that page. If you have a new player who's never played with you before, if they read that page, they've got like 80% of what they really need to know about what's going on. And then behind the scenes, once you've got that core world building, and again, 30 pages is like your max, man. Ideally, it's like 15, 10, 5, as small as you can get. Really pack it together if you can. Right, but once you got those pieces together, then in a separate document, you're going to take all those plot coupons and you're going to write them out. You're going to write down that NPC. You're going to write down the capital city you created. You're going to write down that really cool, super unique magic system that no one's ever thought about, that's super unique to your world. And oh wait, Brandon Sanderson already made it, but you know, whatever, because Brandon Sanderson has beaten all of us to the punch with everything that he does. And all of us DMs are just trying to catch up to that man. But you got your plot coupons written out. That's the important part. You got them written out. And then for whatever time you have left in that year before you run another campaign, you're going to be fleshing out those plot coupons. You are going to be writing how they connect to each other, cool twists that your players would never expect. You're going to look at what is outwardly facing to the players. And it might be, oh yeah, that's Mark the lawyer. But then once you go behind the scenes, Mark the lawyer is actually an assassin for a dark god. That's crazy. And then ideally, and this is when the world building gets really good, there's a second twist that recontextualizes everything again. So we have Mark the lawyer, but he's actually an assassin for a dark god. But actually, Mark doesn't actually kill his victims because he's actually a traitor to the dark god. He's actually working for the world government and is putting all of these victims in cryostasis because he's getting ready to go on the first manned mission out of the solar system. And that's pretty terrible, I will admit, but it's late at night, so cut me some slack. But you're gonna go really deep into those few concepts. And then when the players interact with the world, when they interact with the things that you've been creating and that are outwardly facing to them, and they touch something and they go, oh my gosh, it's so detailed, Puff. And you'll be going, Well, yeah, I spent all the time working on that. Like, those are the things that I put out to you guys. And they're gonna marvel at how detailed your world is, but Puff, you and me will know the truth. It's a rigged game. World building is a rigged game. You control the questions they'll ask, because you're the one directing the spotlight of what your players see and what the players really kind of find important. If you describe something to your players and the outward-facing world building, get ready to describe it. And here's the great joy with this type of world building, because once you have all this banked up, your players are naturally going to ask about something that you didn't actually think about. But Puff, I'm about to blow your mind. I'm about to blow all of your minds for a second, I think. You actually did think about it. Because once you got those 50 plot coupons, and once you're really good at folding these ideas, well, you'll be able to take just about anything and connect it with 6 degrees of separation. Ideally like 2 degrees of separation. Yeah, that strange tavern keeper that you described and your players are talking about, well actually, you didn't realize it at the time, but some of their features and some of their general mannerisms actually match with someone who's in this cult over here that you already world built. Wait a minute, it's so obvious. They're part of that cult. And now, because you folded them into a plot coupon that's already there, bam, it seems like your world is so detailed. And then that just feeds into everything that your players are doing, because they'll look at whatever world building you have, they'll look at their notes and be like, it was there the entire time! Puff told us about this like 20 sessions ago, or it was right in the document, we should have really read that. We're just gonna read everything again just to make sure, because man, you just put so much time and effort and attention. And we all know that this was just kind of a happy accident, but it's an accident that came around because of your planning. So my advice over the course of the next year, focus on world building, don't touch plot points. Your players will influence the story and the world, don't worry about that. You will always be able to fit in player influence into a world. They carve out their own little niches in places that you've never expected. But my advice is that I need you to focus on a few pieces of world building and go really deep into those. And then when you're actually running a homebrew campaign, rig the game. I want you to lean into the things that you've actually world built, and I need you to fold those ideas into them. And the more world building you do, the bigger a pool you'll have to fold more ideas into. But Puff, once you have that solid core, man, it's gonna make things so much easier. Okay, next question by Fabled Freedom. Good luck on your challenge. Thank you. And of all the D&D channels I've explored, yours has some of the most nuanced and in-depth. Okay, well, thank you. This is just all very kind of you. My personal favorites are DM Academy and Encounter of the Week videos. I love making DM Academy stuff, and I loved Encounter of the Week. Just not many people watched Encounter of the Week, honestly. Some of my worst performing videos of all time are Encounter of the Week. But I'm never going to stop doing DM Academy videos. Q&A. What happened to the Bedlam campaign? Will you ever release session videos or break down certain parts of a session to teach/illustrate more of your DMing style/philosophy? So, the Bedlam campaign's an interesting story, because I've been running it now for almost a year, I think. And it was always going to be a campaign diary, because I didn't really feel comfortable with releasing campaign session videos. Mainly because I use a lot of art from the internet and music from some of my favorite composers. And that's all fine and dandy to do in a home campaign when you're not actually making money off of it and you don't have a ton of eyes on you. But it wouldn't be as cool if 9,000 people were watching you. And I'm using art that I found on Pinterest, which was taken from another website, and I can't credit the actual artist who was putting in the work to make that piece. Now, to get around that, I actually did commission artwork for each player character. Now, that art was delayed by like 2 or 3 months. And so it was delayed a long time, and I was already deep into Bedlam by the time it was finally finished. I suppose this might be spoilers for Bedlam in the future, but I don't really care because it's going to kind of give context to what happened. So Bedlam is the craziest campaign I've ever run. I think the name was a curse, because I have run literally thousands of hours of D&D. I might be approaching 10,000 hours at this point. I've definitely surpassed it if you add in all the prep time that I do. Just in session over the past year, I've been in a D&D campaign or the equivalent for right around 700 hours. And if you consider that I've been playing TTRPGs for the last 12 years, that's crazy, since like 2011. Not at this pace, mind you, not even close to this pace, but for like the last 4 or 5 years, at this pace. I just have to be nearing that point. But things have happened in Bedlam that have never happened to me before. And it's not your prototypical campaign. So I've been struggling to figure out how to couch these lessons because I needed to figure out what the lessons were myself. Like, for instance, half of the character art when I got it didn't even matter. Because the season finale of the first season, I break all my campaigns into seasons, like these 10 to 12 session chunks that are these self-contained arcs within a story that feel like they have this narrative inertia and progression, and they just kind of work together to have this specific vibe. Well, at the end of season 1, half the party joined the villains. Like, the party went full evil, and then at the start of the next season, we got introduced to a whole bunch of new characters. And that is one of the least crazy things that has happened in the campaign. At the time, I was like, oh my gosh, like, how am I going to describe this? What's going to be my lesson? Like, I need to keep on playing this. I need to figure out what's going on. And things just got crazier from there. The number of twists and turns that are in this story are insane. And the players are operating at such high levels that absolutely I want to go and I tackle Bedlam more Fabled Freedom. But I need to do it in the right way. Now, eventually, I want to pick the right session to break down, or maybe release a session so that you guys can see how I DM, see how I operate. Honestly, I kind of want to pick a session that I think I DM'd badly and show you guys where I could improve. But yes, I have not forgotten about Bedlam. It is firmly in my mind right now. But part of the problem is also breaking down, all right, how do I introduce you guys to these characters? How do I introduce you to the world? How do I structure these campaign diaries, especially with the knowledge that I have going forward? Because I started doing these basic audio logs as I was going during the first season, and I quickly realized at the end of the season, yeah, these aren't going to work. So don't worry, definitely thinking about it. Next comment by Zamoon. I don't know about your energy, I don't know about it either, but I'm here with clicks and comments. Thank you. Commenting is literally the best thing that you can do if you like a video. The YouTube algorithm loves comments. Good luck, thank you. Long videos are hard to do sometimes. I think they're hard to do all the time. But if you can make it engaging enough, you've got me. That's the trick, isn't it? Looking forward to arguing with you in the comments later this month. Yeah, honestly, me too. And not really even arguing, just discussing. Because at the end of this video, when I said I had the goal of pissing people off, that was again to kind of try and provoke that response. Because ideally, I'm trying to poke at a bit of information that you're keeping from the world. Because all of you have your own experiences too that you can share with all of us. And some of the things that you guys share are far better than what I can share. You know, I'm just one guy that gets lucky and says something kind of intelligent sometimes. Not even that. Just not completely brain dead stupid. But you guys come in from all corners of the internet and life with all of these golden nuggets of knowledge all the time. And you say things better than I ever could. The problem is just getting you guys to say it and have confidence in what you're saying. But you guys also really like to correct people when they're wrong. So it's all about saying something in the right way to get you to respond without wanting to burn my literal house down or drive a pitchfork through my chest. That is easier said than done. But I'm all for talking to you guys in the comments and hearing what you guys have to say. And sometimes it's me just looking at a comment and going, yeah, they're right about that one, and then moving on, but that's enough. Let's see, next one with Jahao Silva. I'm sorry if I butchered that name. Excited for this. I'm a DM for D&D 5e and your channel has helped me a lot. Great, I'm so excited about that. One thing I liked is your method for balancing combat. Thank you. That is the thing that I really wanted to share with people. Can we see more videos about that? I think so. or some encounter design videos. Yeah, encounter design is just really hard though. Like, those are the videos that take a lot of time because encounter design really is an art, and you have to just kind of feel it out. There are certain tips and tricks I have, but I kind of view encounter design like cooking, where you have to know the basics. You have to know how to balance an encounter. You have to know, what is the general range of damage that my party can do, and you have to be able to figure that out. And you have to know what you're trying to get from an encounter, and I think that might be the next video. Designing encounters that go beyond just murdering enemies. I mean, of course, you want to kill or incapacitate the enemies. That's actually a majority of encounters. But it's encounters that go one step further. Or if you're going to kill all the enemies, they have this little mechanical nuance that makes them interesting. Like, just tonight, I ran a campaign where the enemies basically all shared one health pool. It was in a system other than D&D, and the system uses things called stamina points and health blocks. Health blocks determine if you're alive, stamina points get to negate damage. So all the creatures are sharing health blocks, but they each have their own stamina point values. And so the little tidbit of interesting design in the combat is that players need to figure out, if we whittle down the defenses of this one enemy, if we get its stamina points to 0, then we can just wail on it and not need to deal with all these other enemies around. And that's how we take a combat that otherwise could be pretty mundane and boring and make it interesting. We throw these little wrinkles in the design that make players think, or get them out of their normal rhythm so that every encounter doesn't feel the same. This is why I kind of hate random encounters, because you can fall into this rut of random encounter, same feeling enemy, bag of hit points, rinse and repeat. So yes, I want to do more encounter videos. Those are really hard videos to make though, and I'm honestly, at the core of this channel, more concerned with making sure you get your narratives right for your campaigns with any system, that you get your role-playing right. Because I've seen campaigns survive with mediocre combat encounters. Hot take, but I think Critical Role's combat encounters are mid at best. Like, I don't think Matt Mercer's talent is in designing excellent combat encounters. I think the talent comes from designing wonderful NPCs, worlds, and building amazing, elaborate stories and narratives. Because if your campaign doesn't have an underlying narrative to it, or if the role-playing isn't good, those campaigns tend to struggle to survive more. Because then it's combat after combat, rinse and repeat. So I think naturally my attention goes more there when I'm planning what video I want to do next. But you're right for calling me out, because I do need to get more encounter design videos up. Next question though. In your damage calculation video, another encounter question, you said that the boss monster should do 15 to 20% of the character's HP per attack. Yeah, how much damage should they be doing during a round of combat? Alright, great question. So my underlying philosophy for this is that the average D&D combat lasts about 3 rounds. If we take that into consideration, then if you're trying to make like this challenging encounter, one that's going to grip your players and have them feel on the edge, your boss monster should be doing about a third of your party's total hit points. So for the sake of argument, let's say that your party of 4 adds up to 300 hit points exactly. Your boss monster should ideally be doing about 100 hit points of damage per round. That way the party members feel like this thing is threatening, especially if you're spreading out the damage between all the party members and you're not focus firing one. Then everyone kind of feels like they're in a little bit of peril and danger, and as the combat goes on, it feels like their resources are draining, because they are. Their hit points are getting lower, of course. And then usually player resources prevail and they beat the monsters by like middle of round 3. Maybe into round 4, but usually D&D combats max out at about 3 rounds. Now for an average encounter, I would probably be saying that the enemies should be doing, let's say, a little less than a third of the party's overall hit points during a round of combat. If you're wanting to make a really challenging fight, or maybe for something like a final boss when You're not really that concerned with PC or player death because it's the very end of the campaign, and a little bit more than 1/3. Heck, some of the best final bosses I've ran, some of the deadliest, did about a little less than half of the party's overall hit points per round in combat. And they were able to do this because the party had healing. You can pick yourself back up. Healing Word is an extremely powerful spell, but by thinking in damage in terms of total party health, you can better gauge how deadly an encounter is because you're looking at the sum total and not specific instances, if you know what I mean. Like when I'm balancing a combat for pretty much any system, I don't look at what the damage is for specific party members. I look at what is the average party damage each round. And part of that just comes from looking at the numbers. Part of that is me playing a campaign with a party, taking good notes throughout the first few sessions and figuring out what their average damage is. And then when I get that done and I also know what their total hit points are, I can make monsters with hit points that align with their average damage. So it's very easy if I have an encounter where I want to make it last 2 rounds to say, this is the average amount of damage they do. I'm just going to double that hit points plus a few extra hit points just because players are always going to do just a little bit more damage than you expect. And then I'm going to give the monster sufficient damage so that it poses a bit of threat across 2 rounds of combat. And that's how I churn out an encounter that lasts 2 rounds, that engages the party, and is over in 45 minutes like clockwork. But again, this information comes with thousands of hours of experience behind it, and a ton of trial and error on my part, because before I was a good DM, I'm not going to call myself a great DM by any means, just a good DM, I was a terrible DM. If the current me was a player in those games, I probably would have left the table. But luckily, I get to sit around now and I get to help those players and those new GMs who are going through those experiences and help to move them along a little bit faster. Because now that TTRPGs like D&D are in the spotlight and it's more socially acceptable to talk about them and play them, there are so many more resources for you guys to use to become better, to great DMs so much more quickly than I ever could have. Honestly, you guys can just sit around and watch Critical Role or Dimension 20 or listen to any number of podcasts and just passively gain all of these just tips and wisdom from all these great game masters out there. So I encourage you to do that. And man, I still have so many questions that I need to answer. So I'm gonna release another Q&A video tomorrow because I had other questions that I was going to do. And they're questions throughout the channel's history. I need to get those done. But gosh, this was actually a lot of fun. I think I want to do this more. Just sit down and answer your questions. So legitimately, if you want a question for a Q&A, then put Q&A before a comment and I will look at them. I'll probably just start making a document so I can answer these type of questions in a more long form, general rambly sort of video so I can really get to what I want to say to you guys. Because I'm answering comments now the same way I would answer comments to a new player who just sat down at my gaming table at my local gaming shop. The same advice that I would be giving to someone in front of me, I'm trying to impart to you guys now. This is a little bit more difficult because I can't interface with you. I can't get all the information. So of course, take my targeted advice with a grain of salt because I can only go with what you've told me, and depending on certain bits of information, it might completely change my answer. But in my opinion, it's better to give you guys actionable pieces of information that you can use and possibly succeed with, or you look at it and go, yeah, Colin, this sucks. Why would you tell me this? I want to do this thing instead. Then say, well, it depends on your campaign, guys. It all depends on your players. have you done session 0? Because I'm gonna be honest, that shit helps nobody. Like, it's okay if you say it depends sometimes, but if it depends all the time, then you've said nothing. I'd rather be wrong, saying things with my chest, trying to give you guys actionable things to do, than say it depends and let you keep on floundering in whatever jamming hell you found yourself in. Oh god, I'm gonna have to edit this video before noon tomorrow. And I have 3 hours of recorded audio. This is 3 hours of audio, and probably like an hour is usable. If you made it this far, comment, because the algorithm loves comments. It's like YouTube's favorite thing. And check out this video right here. It's another kind of long, rambly video, and if you've made it this far, you might like more of me just rambling, talking to you with my melodic voice. And thank you for entering the dungeon.